Welcome to the University of Michigan Economics Department's graduate commencement for the class of 2022. Just for a little throwback, there used to be something called Michigan time, where everything started at 10 minutes after the hour. So that's how we decided to kick things off today, so people would be a little nostalgic before they leave. Anyway, my name is Mel Steffens, and I'm the chair of the Department of Economics. I'm extremely honored to be a small part of this event to recognize your achievements. Every year, we are immensely fortunate to have such wonderful students who matriculate into our Master of Applied Economics programs, as well as our PhD programs. Students of both programs complete challenging academic work, which combines theoretical rigor with sophisticated empirical methodologies. Upon first arriving in Ann Arbor, students are immediately thrust into their studies, working countless hours, going through problem sets, scrutinizing lecture notes, and studying for exams. Working together with classmates who also find themselves suddenly thrust into a world where their life revolves around nothing but economics, and many miles from home in many instances, they form bonds and friendships, many of which will last a lifetime. While you may then head in different directions, taking classes in different fields, possibly in different colleges across campus, spending time alone, secluded, working on your thesis, you've all remained focused on the end goal, which is completing your degree and being here today. Today, we commemorate all that you have accomplished to date. I say to date because we anticipate that you still have many accomplishments ahead of you. First, I would like to congratulate our graduates. Let's give them a well-deserved round of applause. You should be incredibly proud of yourselves, as we are of you. Second, I would like to thank the families and friends of today's graduates. Thank you for all that you have done to support our graduates while they venture towards their degree. Graduates, let's take a moment to thank those family and friends who have supported you along the way. Next, it's my pleasure to turn over the podium to our Director of Doctoral Studies, Chris House.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Hi, my name is Christopher House. I'm the Director of Graduate Studies at the Economics Department at the University of Michigan. It is my distinct honor and privilege to present this year's graduating PhD and master's students to you. I had the privilege of teaching virtually every one of the PhD students here today from the start of their graduate studies, and I now have the privilege of celebrating this incredible accomplishment as they attain the degrees that they've worked so hard to get. This is really an incredible accomplishment, and you should all feel very, very proud of the work that you've done. When the students begin the PhD program, I'm quite sure that most of them feel that this is simply an impossible task. And indeed, the research in these dissertations has come at great sacrifice. The new PhDs before you have spent countless hours studying, staring at computer screens, deriving bizarre mathematical formulas, running experiments, collecting data, all the while wondering what's happened to their social lives. I'm sure many of the students here will be quickly returning to their work once the ceremony is complete. I'm also certain that the parents and faculty members have been wondering what exactly these students have been up to for all this time. Well, today you're going to find out a little bit about the work they've done. So I'm going to stop talking because I want to make sure that there's enough time for the students to come up and for the faculty advisors to say some brief words about the work they've done. So I will announce each student and the faculty member who is accompanying them, and they will come up to the stage. Congratulations to you all. Okay. Maria Aristizabal Ramirez and her advisor, Catherine Dominguez.
I am very excited to talk to you a little bit about Maria's thesis. Maria advanced our understanding of the ways in which financial intermediation affects firm employment and workers' wages. She constructed an incredible data set of Colombian firms that allowed her to trace the impact of a bank-specific credit shock to particular firms, and then from those firms to their workers. These data allow her to document new facts regarding the impact of the availability of finance on the distribution of employment and wages. She develops a macroeconomic model that features search in the labor market, working capital, and a production function where capital substitutes for low-skilled workers and complements high-skilled workers. She shows that when firms with more liquidity experience an increase in the supply of credit, they increase investment and have sufficient funds to expand hiring of both kinds of workers. Firms with less liquidity, however, face a trade-off. The extra credit is used to increase investment, but the firm finds it optimal to change the mix of workers, hiring more workers at the high-wage, high-skilled part of the distribution, and hiring fewer or even releasing workers at the low end of the worker skill distribution. The model is calibrated to Colombian data and highlights the role of these two mechanisms in explaining the empirical facts. Maria is off to the Federal Reserve Board of Governors this summer. We will miss her in Ann Arbor, but look forward to all the ways that she will make contributions to the economics profession in Washington, D.C. Congratulations, Maria.
Hannah Boulder and her advisor, Jim Hines.
How is everyone here feeling today? Hannah's research has a lot to say about what can and should be done about your health. Her main study analyzes the speed at which physicians and surgeons discontinue using procedures once studies show that they are ineffective or counterproductive. The answer, by the way, lies in financial incentives and the potential liability that doctors face if they fail to use the best procedures. It turns out that matters a lot, especially in rural areas. So the next time you're getting a procedure, check the liability rules in your state. I will tell you that Hannah's work on you can continue using discredited procedures has me still running OLS whenever I can. Lest you think that everything is incentives, Hannah also has work about taxes on sugary drinks and the extent to which they are captured in the prices that stores post when they're selling those drinks. Her study examines cases both in Philadelphia and in Berkeley, California, finding that these taxes did in fact wind up in the prices in Philadelphia, thereby discouraging consumption of sugary drinks, whereas in Berkeley, where it is understood that all property is theft, the taxes were not passed along. Hannah is now off to a postdoctoral fellowship at Michigan State University Medical School, and I am sure many more insights will be coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jado Choi and his advisor, Dominic Bartlemay.
So it's my pleasure, excuse me. Sorry. It's my pleasure to present Jado Choi here. He, you know, we have worked together a long time. He was one of my first students that I've kind of, you know, worked with all the way through the program. He wrote a very ambitious dissertation tackling, you know, one of the most important questions in economics, which is how to understand, you know, growth miracles, and in particular the growth miracle in South Korea and the role that government policy and, you know, new technological adoption played in that growth miracle. I really learned a lot from his research and from working with him. He's a friend. We'll miss him very much. And but he's on to exciting things. He'll be going to the Federal Reserve Board along with Maria this summer. And yeah, congratulations, Jado. It's been a pleasure.
Jaron Cordero and his advisor, Tanya Rosenblatt.
Jaron came to Ann Arbor a couple of years ago after getting his bachelor's in economics and mathematics at West Virginia University. After playing around with economic theory, Jaron took a course in behavioral and experimental economics and got inspired to study real people as they make economic decisions. In his dissertation, Jaron explores the motives behind human prosociality. Heavily influenced by research in psychology, Jaron decided to tackle foundational questions and the intersection of economics and psychology using experimental methods. He questioned established convention in experimental economics, and in a truly interdisciplinary spirit, adopted techniques from psychology and econophysics to improve his experimental design and implementation. In his quest for a simplest possible model that captures real-world behavior, Jaron settled on a functional form that has both own and other regarding utility. He implemented laboratory donation experiments with beneficiaries on a platform, handup.org, in which he focused on how people's willingness to give changed when the impact of their gift varied. He used this data to show that altruistic donors either give because they recognize the money is worth more to the beneficiary, or because they care more about beneficiaries' utility than their own. In his future work, Jaron plans to use these insights to develop personalized interventions that inspire altruism and help improve well-being for all. Fittingly, for somebody who studies foundations of economic altruism, Jaron is well-read in economic classics. Let me finish with the quote by Alfred Marshall from Jaron's webpage, which inspired Jaron in his work. People are capable of much more unselfish service than they generally render, and the supreme aim of the economist is to discover how this latent social asset can be developed most quickly and turned to account most wisely. Just like Jaron, I like this quote very much, because the essence of economics is about improving the human condition, and often, as economists, we lose sight of this in our models and technical arguments. And we need researchers like Jaron to remind us of this basic truth. Congratulations, soon to be Dr. Cordero.
John Denton Schneider and his advisor, Hoyt Bleakley.
Well, I brought my list of 15 embarrassing things about JD, but I see from the other announcements that wasn't what I was supposed to do, so let me think of something else. Well, I'm very happy to have worked with JD. In fact, we met just before the program. His advisor recommended that we meet, and we hit it off. We had a lot to talk about. I followed his work since then. I've lost track of the number of years, but you don't need to stay for another one. That's fine. His work is akin to some of my own interests in thinking about economic history, long-term trajectory of things, developing countries specifically. Looks at this very interesting episode in Southern Africa in the early, well, I guess sort of late 19th, early 20th century, and follows it forward, where there was a massive amount of migration to South Africa to work on mines. And that's, mining, of course, maybe you can be interested in that, but we're just going to follow what happens afterwards, which is these people come back to their home village with a ton of money, right? And he has this nice research design where you have this kind of arbitrary rectilinear border that cuts Mozambique in half, where the villages below it, they get all this money dumped on them effectively, and the ones that are just above it don't. And so what happens to such a place? That's, well, go get the dissertation if you want the whole story. The simple version of it is a lot of interesting stuff happens. The first thing he's able to trace by collecting a lot of old historical census data is that these young men show up, and it amazingly changes marriage patterns when they show up with all this money. But stuff, this continues for a while. He's able to follow this for almost a century and look at how this affects attitudes, how it affects disease patterns, how it affects economic development, seeing kind of the general trajectory. He has some other work that's related, thinking about health conditions and economic development, and a number of promising early projects, but I've sort of run out of time. I'm very happy to have worked with JD. I'm very excited to see what he comes up with next. I'll miss our conversations that I would say were frequent, but they sort of weren't frequent enough. We had to, with the pandemic, we wore out the lawn chairs when we would meet outside of Lorch and have some great chats about his progress. Good luck. We will be pleased to see your progress as you join Clark University in Worcester, Mass. In the fall. Good luck. Thank you.
Jamie Fogel and his advisor, Sebastian Statello.
So I'm very happy to tell you a little bit about Jamie's research here. Of course, I will not be able to do it justice in just a short amount of time. His thesis, to my taste, is a little bit of a tour de force. Just thinking about his main chapter in the thesis, he both takes us back to basics and asks what is a labor market, which is a fundamental question in economics, and at the same time takes us all the way to the frontier of quantitative technical work, and answers this question using a rich data set and cutting-edge econometric and machine learning techniques. His research changes the way that we think about the response of workers to changes in the environment, such as international trade shocks. I'm very happy to have, being able to form part of Jamie's thesis, and I really look forward to see what he's going to come up with next when he heads off to Opportunity Insights. Congratulations, Jamie, well deserved.
Paul Keinsgrab and his advisor, Joel Slemrod.
Well, it's been my pleasure to get to know Paul pretty well. We've met regularly, at least every couple weeks for the last 3 years, and talking about both his work and mine. Paul's dissertation answers 3 questions. Do tax changes for the rich trickle down to the rest of us? He answers this using variation in local labor markets. Do local business taxes deter business entry? He answers this question using German data. And third, what is the role of firms in determining how payroll taxes affect after-tax wages? Now, if you remember the questions, I'll now give you the answers. Not so much. Yes, and it depends. Paul has a rare combination of skills at data analysis and economic modeling, and he will bring his skills next to Cornerstone Research in New York City, and they're lucky to have him. Congratulations, Paul.
Bunyara Lau Prapasorn and her advisor, Sebastian Sotelo.
Okay, so I'll tell just a little bit about Mosa's research. Her thesis tackles very important questions at the intersection of international trade and development economics. To give you one example, her job market paper asks the very important question of why are some farmers poor in developing countries? And she hypothesizes and convincingly shows that it's because farmers do not operate in a vacuum, but rather they interact with other economic actors that oftentimes have market power and push down the prices that these farmers obtain. To give you another example, she also asks what is the legacy of the ancient Silk Road in thinking about modern day organization of economic activity over space and the location of cities. So I was watching a YouTube video the other day about this because it's a very interesting topic, and then I realized, she's actually doing research on this, so she's pushing the frontier. Amazing. Now, on a more personal note, Moz is the first student whose committee I have had the good fortune of chairing. I would say that I'm proud, but actually I had very little to do with her success, so congratulations, Moz.
Ooh. Nafisa Lo Hawala and her advisor, Ing Fan.
I first met Nafisa in her third year after I came back from 1 year on leave. She told me that she's interested in doing research in I/O. I was initially concerned because, well, the year I was on leave, the second year sequence wasn't offered, so she never took it. So I was initially concerned, but she soon amazed me with her self-learning ability. And that ability led her to write an amazing dissertation. Her job market paper studies electric vehicle subsidies. You may be wondering, what's the big deal? The grandparents, parents, and maybe some kids sitting there saying, I know something about it. Indeed, there are many papers studying subsidies, how to design the subsidy, what's the right amount, whom to target. But she studies a different question, how to end a subsidy program. And how to end a subsidy program is not trivial because it affects firm incentives, firm behavior, and consumer welfare. So her dissertation really contributes to that important discussion. So after graduation, Nafisa is going to join Resources for the Future, and that is research organization that focuses on environmental issues, so it's a great fit for her. And Nafisa is intelligent and mature. I'm sure she will do well. So good luck, congratulations.
Dina Lomonosov and her advisor, Jim Hines.
Everyone knows houses are expensive. but only Dina really knows why. The answer is some combination of local property taxes and the federal income tax. To study this, Dina used data. Where'd she get the data? It's from the state of New Jersey. To people in the New York area, New Jersey is kind of the punchline to a joke. But to Dina, it's the Bible, the source of all wisdom. Dina's thesis carefully and meticulously analyzes the determinants of house prices, delivering, all kidding aside, a number of important new insights. Next, she is off to a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Wisconsin, where they have houses and barns, and Dina will doubtless be analyzing those prices too. She's a wonderful economist and person, and they're very lucky to get her.
Sean Martin and her advisor, Brian Jacob.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here this afternoon and get to talk a little bit about Sean's work. In her dissertation, she focused on the kind of big, broad topics at the intersection of education and the labor market. Her job market paper focuses on the determinants of labor market inequality, and specifically why some college majors have more rapidly growing earnings than other college majors early in their career. So the first insight that she has is that it's not simply kind of more technical majors or less technical majors, but there's actually something about the specificity of a major. So specific majors provide students with concrete skills, and those majors are not only computer science, engineering, but also education and nursing. There's other majors which Sean describes as general majors, which includes English, business, history. It turns out that general majors have more quickly growing earnings over the early career, and she amasses an amazing data set to understand why this might be the case. The data set itself that she put together with restricted use census data, the National Survey of College Graduates, and longitudinal employer household dynamics data is itself a valuable contribution that I think many researchers will be using in the years to come. She develops a model of on-the-job search, she estimates it, and she finds that consistent with the model's predictions, general majors are majors that display higher rates of employment changes in industry and occupation, and that explains a large fraction of their higher growth over their early career. Sean will be taking her skills to Cornerstone Research in New York City, and they are very, very lucky to have her, and I am very lucky to have had her as a student. Congratulations. I will miss you.
Jennifer Mayo and her advisors, Jim Hines and Joel Slemrod.
Jennifer had two advisors, and neither of us were willing to stand down, so we're both going to speak. I met Jennifer a year before she started as a PhD student here because she was a pre-doc research assistant for a colleague, but was down the hall from my office. And I used to see her often, and I dubbed her the miner, spelled M-I-N-E-R, because every day she was right there from 8 o'clock, digging the ore out of out of the veins. I knew she was going to do well. Jennifer's dissertation is about the charitable sector, and one of her essays is about the impact of one of the leading website evaluators of charity called Charity Navigator. What happens when a charity's rating goes up discretely? It's only 1 to 4 or down. And another essay is about what happens to a charity's donations and activities when a rival charity gets a big gift. Very interestingly, it turns out there are positive spillovers in general, but not if the rival provides a very close substitute to what that charity does. I think Jennifer is already one of the leading experts on in the world on the philanthropic sector, and maybe in a few years we'll be able to say she is the leading expert.
Let me just add that those who believe that life imitates art are not surprised when they learn that Jennifer Mayo studies charity. Not only is she an outstanding social scientist, she is an exceptionally generous, charitable soul who has made a huge difference to our department as well as her advisors, and we will miss her greatly when she goes off to the University of Missouri next year.
Bernardo Modenesi and his advisor, Mel Steffens.
All right, so I'm very proud to have this opportunity to say a few words about Bernardo. He came to us from finishing a master's degree at the University of Sao Paulo. When I was next putting together my next words, I was really tempted to say, see Jamie Fogel's discussion earlier. Because Jamie and Bernardo have collaborated a lot in their dissertations, a lot of work, spent a lot of time together over the last, we won't say how many years, and they've produced some fantastic research. But I'm not going to do that. I will actually pretend we did not hear anything about Jamie before. Sorry, Jamie's family. And we'll just talk a little bit about Bernardo, right? So Bernardo and Jamie, what they're doing is they develop a new methodology for thinking about outcomes of workers and how it interacts in the labor market. So traditionally, empirical analysis of labor markets has focused on a few aspects of things, right? So one way of thinking about how labor markets are working, you say, well, let me just divide workers into high-skill and low-skill workers. Right, but that misses a lot of nuances out there, right? Because you end up doing things such as treating minors, the same N-I-M-I-N-E-R that Joel just said, those minors in the same way they treat production workers, right? In fact, they're just facing many different types of markets. So then you might say, well, we can just divide up workers across their different occupations. Of course, the problem is that workers can move across occupations, so that doesn't really go so well. Right? And so the insight that Bernardo has brought is using network theory, right, which is taking lots of data, right, using big data, and linking workers in many ways, which I will say is still a little bit mysterious to me, but I understand the economic model that they wrote down to make it all work. Right? And so the key thing is that you then get a bunch of workers who, say, run in the same circles, right, and then using that in lieu of, say, occupation or high skill, low skill, right, allows you to do some pretty wonderful things, right? So for example, in the first application in the dissertation, they examine how labor market shocks, so unexpected things that occur, differentially impact workers, and they use the experiment, if you will, of the 2016 Olympics in Brazil, right, where suddenly there's all this big construction and all these big structural changes to understand how it differentially impacted different workers in the labor market and got new insights and showed how it differed tremendously from what you would have found doing things differently. In the second application, they are examining male-female earnings differences, right? Historically, we've decomposed these things into things that we can observe, differences in, say, skill, and then also differences in how much of benefit you get to a skill, right? So, you know, one more year of education, how much do you get to that? And now what they're adding in is this new part of the decomposition, which is, you know, the different networks that people are in, right? Running in these different circles and how much that plays a role and how much that changes the decompositions that we have, right? And, you know, besides spending a lot of time hanging out with Jamie, Bernardo also found and managed ways to pick up a master's degree in statistics while he was here, which is fairly impressive, I must say. And he is on his way to a postdoc at MIDAS, the Michigan Institute for Data Science. And so we'll look forward to seeing him in town for the next few years. Hopefully we will catch up. I will not miss the presentations that he and Jamie have of their same paper. They present it like 25 times. I've seen it so many times. Oh, man. They know it's true. That's why they're laughing. But it's fantastic. We love it. We appreciate it. It was a fantastic paper, fantastic dissertation. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Dylan Moore and his advisor, Joel Slemrod.
Dylan is a very creative public finance theorist that I've gotten to know very well, both talking about his work and he and I writing a paper together. Let me tell you a little bit about his own research. First, he developed a new method for learning about how taxpayers respond to the income tax schedule and what that implies for where the bracket cutoffs of the different rates of the schedule should be. Second, he wrote a paper about plutocratic feedback loops. What might that be? It's where political power, some groups' political power, can cause redistribution toward them, which then increases their political power, which increases the redistribution they can do toward themselves. And how does that end up? That's a plutocratic feedback loop. And finally, he studies optimal policy toward political contributions. For example, should political contributions be deductible or otherwise subsidized by the government? And in this study, he has an application to the subsidy polity of Canada, where Dylan hails from. Now, you might be wondering whether Dylan, after he finishes here, is going to go back to Canada. No, the answer is Dylan is headed to the University of Hawaii. And I understand that many of his fellow students and even some faculty have inquired what his pull will be in appointing visiting scholars at the University of Hawaii. But we're going to miss Dylan, and I in particular will miss our regular conversations.
Paul Organ and his advisor, Joel Slemrod, who's still here.
Paul and I have also talked very regularly for the last 2 or 3 years. We wrote a paper together, and I have talked with him a lot about his own fascinating research about taxation, of all things. He asks in his dissertation, what has been the role of tax policy in the recent rash of expatriations from the U.S., that is, people renouncing their citizenship? He asks, what is the effect of public disclosure of tax debt, using the example of California, where the top 500 tax debtors go on a website where everybody can see who they are. Does this actually encourage people to pay off their debt so they won't make the list? Several months ago, I asked Paul what his dream job was. And he said his dream job was to work at the Office of Tax Analysis at the Department of Treasury. And I am happy to say today that after he is finished here, Paul will be going to the Office of Tax Analysis at the United States Treasury. Congratulations, Paul.
Michael Ricks and his advisor, Brian Jacob.
Hello. So it's hard to describe Michael's work because it is so varied. He is a student who has worked on research on kindergarten policies to optimal energy subsidies, to something about production functions that I'm not sure I fully understand quite yet. I was lucky enough to be one of his advisors on some of his early education-related research. And his job market paper is an amazing piece of work that examines the decisions that parents make about when to start their children in school. Prior research suggested that entering kindergarten later can benefit students. Spurred a lot of interest among parents and educators alike. But as Michael notes in his dissertation, this research misses some key pieces. He fills this gap by developing a new framework that combines the marginal treatment effects literature in economics with some traditional education framings. And he takes this framework to data on tens of thousands of Michigan public school students and creates a new understanding of the cost and benefits and how the benefits of starting kindergarten can vary depending on the socioeconomic status of children, really making a major contribution to this field. He's also done work, as I mentioned, on energy subsidy policies, on career technical education, how exposure to a diverse set of individuals affects one's own racial attitudes and behaviors. And next year, Michael will be doing a postdoc at the National Bureau of Economic Research in Cambridge, after which time he'll be starting as an assistant professor at the University of Nebraska. And I look forward to following his work in the future.
Merve Sarazik and her advisor, Tanya Rosenblatt.
Merve Sarazik came to Ann Arbor from Istanbul, Turkey, where she completed her undergraduate and master's degrees in economics. Merve is an applied microeconomist with a special interest in behavioral and experimental economics. It has been a real pleasure to work with her for several years and see her become an independent and confident researcher. In her research, she shows that if you leave markets to its own devices, we can expect unintended consequences, like discrimination, to blossom. The new world of internet and platforms was supposed to democratize access to goods, services, and information. Instead, online platforms replicated and sometimes exacerbated biases that we previously observed in brick-and-mortar economy. In her field experiment on the sharing economy platform Airbnb, Merve showed the identity discrimination could arise based on subtle cues transmitted through user profiles. She found that the profile signaled Arab and Muslim identity, hosts did not respond to inquiries at the same rate as to the users with majority identity. Lucky for users, and perhaps in response to such audit studies, Airbnb has prioritized different platform design, which now minimizes such discrimination. sometimes markets can fix themselves. If not, we always have regulation. But Murphy also shows that when the government comes in with well-intended regulation, unintended consequences can ensue. In her job market paper, she studies both theoretically and using a laboratory experiment the consequences of salary history ban legislation, only to show the legislation amplifies employers' existing biases, and we can expand bans to exacerbate wage inequality instead of alleviating it as intended. As Murphy heads to protect our retirement savings at Vanguard Research this summer, we can all rest assured that we're in good hands. Congratulations.
Junwei Tang and his advisor, Dominic Bartlemay.
Junwei is another student that I'm very proud to have worked with closely for many years, starting from my second-year PhD course through his third-year paper, some joint work together, and finally on through his dissertation. So Junwei's dissertation studies China, one of the world's most important economies, and in particular, the role of high-speed rail in the spatial distribution of economic activity and the diffusion of productivity across regions in China. It's a very creative and original piece of work. It also required a lot of entrepreneurial energy, including tracking down the elderly retired professor who put together the data set and wasn't very good at answering his email. But Junwei got through all that and produced a really fine piece of work. As part of this, in addition to entrepreneurial talent, Junwei developed a really key skill set in high-dimensional statistics and machine learning, and he's going to be applying his economics and statistics backgrounds in Amazon. Congratulations, Junwei.
Xuan Teng and his advisor, Ying Fan.
So I have known Xuan for years, ever since she took the second-year IO sequence with me. She's a great researcher. Her job market paper studies preferential search ranking. That is the kind of behavior that platforms favor their own products in displaying search outcome. And she identifies the existence of such behavior in Apple App Store, studies the effect of such behavior on developers' quality provision, and then quantified welfare effect. This is really a timely topic, and preferential search ranking has drawn a lot of antitrust concerns, especially in Europe. And Europe is a little bit ahead of the US in regulating digital economy. And Europe is where she is going after graduation. She's going to join University of Munich. When she was on the market, her future colleagues contacted me saying that they are really interested in her research and they very much would like to have her as a colleague, but they are a little concerned whether she is interested in going there. So I talked to her, and then I replied. In my reply, I wrote the following. She is passionate about research and scholarly. She will largely make a decision based on the academic environment. We also talk about the language issue. She thinks having an opportunity to learn a new language, she doesn't speak German yet. She thinks having an opportunity to learn a new language is a feature, not a bug. She's the most tenacious student I have ever taught. And when she puts her mind into something, she will do well. So that's her, tenacious, scholarly, and passionate. With those qualities, I'm sure she will do well. Congratulations.
Jiafu Wang and his advisor, Sebastian Sotelo.
So Jiafu's thesis is at the intersection of international economic and development. The main chapter of his thesis answers a classic question in economic policy, which is whether bad infrastructure is one of the main culprits for poor countries being poor. And he shows convincingly in his paper, using a combination of theory and cutting-edge empirical work, that the answer to this question depends on whether infrastructure is complementary or substitutes to the rest of the economy. And he shows very carefully how much bad infrastructure actually matters for development. But his thesis is very broad-ranging. He's a very broad guy. And he has also written on what is the implications of foreign acquisitions on firms in China's proclivity to export. And he has also written on what are the long-run implications of the removal of a system of quotas that had applied on Chinese textile exporters for a long time. I'm really looking forward to see what new research Jiafu is going to produce. But in the meantime, he's going to take his amazing set of skills to the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. So if you want to know what he's been doing, you just have to read the news. Jiafu is a great economist and a genuinely nice guy, and everybody here in the international group is certainly going to miss him. Congratulations.
Yishu Zheng and her advisor, David Miller.
So Yishu Zheng has two advisors. Her other advisor is Uday Rajan from the finance department at the Ross School. Yishu is a microeconomic theorist who studies continuous time contracts and information design. Her research is mathematically elegant and makes great contributions to several high-profile areas within economic theory. So Yishu's job market paper studies the relationship between a worker and an employer, but her findings might also be applicable to the relationship between an advisor and an advisee. In brief, she shows that as her advisor, I should evaluate her work more leniently if she's been having trouble, but more harshly if she's been doing well, in order to delay her retirement via graduation. Fortunately, no matter how harshly I have critiqued her work, it doesn't seem to have delayed her graduation at all. Unfortunately, although her paper suggests that when she retires from graduate school, I should pay her a constant annuity for the rest of her life, I'll not actually be doing that. Another of Yishu's papers studies a setting like we're in right now, where an information sender, which is me, wants to persuade an audience of receivers, which is you. I should tell you, the audience, not only what to do, but also what to believe. So let me tell you that what you should do is read Yishu's papers. What you should believe is that they're brilliant contributions to economic theory, and according to her results, it's in your interest to take my word for it. So starting this summer, Yishu will be an assistant professor of economics at York University in Toronto. Yishu, it's been amazing to learn from you over these years. Your progress and your papers continue to amaze me, make me wish I had taken more math classes in college and in grad school. But even more so, I've enjoyed our conversations on so many topics outside of research. I'm so proud for your accomplishments, thankful for your friendship, and I'm looking forward to all your future success. Thank you very much.
Okay, so let's have another round of applause for our PhD graduates. So next, it's my pleasure to introduce John Leitner, who is the director of our Master of Applied Economics program.
Okay, thank you, Mel. So we're now going to transition over to the Masters of Applied Economics part of the graduation program. I'm John Leitner. I'm a professor of economics and the current director of the MAE program. So most of you are undoubtedly familiar with the MAE program. If not, in brief, it's a master's program, 3 to 4 semesters in length. It's run by the economics department. It has a core curriculum, of course, of economics classes, but it has an equal number of electives. And the students have a lot of latitude in selecting those electives from across the university. And I like to think that's a hallmark of our program, that they have a lot of choice. So probably the most widely used electives are in finance at Ross, but beyond that, they're spread across the university. So this year, we have 38 graduating MAE students. As I said, it's either 3 or 4 semesters, so 11 finished in December, and 24 are finishing now, and 3 more are scheduled to finish this summer. At Michigan, if you're in a master's program, you can take a second master's degree also, and 14 of our 38 students are doing that. So industrial and operations engineering and applied statistics and data science are the big choices in that. So my primary goal here is to congratulate our students who are finishing. I have taught recently a number of times the macroeconomics part of the MAE program. So I've had all of our students that are graduating today. And I can certainly attest to the fact that they're very fine students. I've always enjoyed teaching that course. The COVID pandemic has affected this class. Last year, a calendar year ago, all the courses were basically on Zoom, and most students didn't come to campus. Nevertheless, in looking through the records of our students, as I do to sign off at their graduation, I could see that this class, like the others, made good use of the academic opportunities at University of Michigan. And I would say their records are excellent. These students overcame some obstacles in having to take online classes. The travel has been difficult, especially for international students. But they did overcome those obstacles. The program is proud of you. You should be proud of yourself. I hope that over time our students will stay in touch with the program. Your University of Michigan email doesn't expire when you leave, so I hope you'll keep monitoring it and maybe from time to time send us messages. We're always interested in what you're doing, what jobs you're pursuing, and so on. And we'll have news for you. In general, as you're graduating today, you're joining a very distinguished set of alumni from the University of Michigan and from your program. I hope that means you're automatically part of a network, and I hope you'll play an active part in it, and I hope you can profit from it over time. I'm sure the other members of the faculty would join with me in wishing you all the best of luck in your future endeavors. Thank you. So for the graduation ceremony for the MAEs, I'm going to get my colleague Heng Liu to read the names, and we're going to have the candidates come up, and I'll hand you the diploma, and we'll get a picture from the photographer, and those will be on your email. You can check it and download the pictures you want. So, Heng, let me turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So I'll start. 陈思宇。季瑜。冯香萌。高火。Anthony Gardella. Alejandra Gonzalez Ramirez.郝前程。李汉俊。李敬东。刘昂轩。刘思辰。刘霄月。罗艺新。 穆宇轩、Natapong Raj.沈一新、唐子顺、Graham Tufts. Wang Zhonghui. Wen Xiwei. Yang Xue. Wang Ziying. Cao Xinyi.
Well, as I said before, we wish them all the best in whatever they do in the future. So let me turn it back over to the chairman, Mel Steffens.
How about just one final last round of applause for our graduates. So thank everyone for coming today. I'm sure your presence here means a lot to our graduates, so thank you for coming from, I'm sure, many places, near and far. We're thankful we've had this opportunity to celebrate your reaching this milestone, but remember it's exactly that. It's just a milestone on your much longer journey. We are very glad that you stopped by the University of Michigan along the way. Friends and family, please head upstairs to Foster Library, where there will be a reception. Graduates, please stay here to take group pictures before heading upstairs to join the reception. And I would like to offer my congratulations once again to our graduates as well as your families and friends. Congratulations and good luck. And even though you're not undergraduates, go blue.